Hey everyone, Digital Scriptorium here, and today I want to show off how to install Ubuntu 25.10, codename Questing Quokka, from start to finish. I'm just going to give a few details before we dive in so you know what you're getting yourself into. This guide is intended as a general use case installation of the operating system. I'm going to show off system requirements, how to create the bootable media, how to install the operating system, and then a general basic tour of the operating system at the end. I won't be going into specific application usage as that is outside of the scope of my guide today. All the links I show off I will include in the description below so you can easily find them if need be. I will also have a link in the description below for a recommended USB thumb drive if you do not have one on hand, as we will be using one during the installation. One disclaimer I just want to mention is a warning that this is an operating system install guide where I completely remove the previous operating system. As is with any operating system, you might run into unforeseen issues, so you have to go into this with an open mind that issues might spring up. Worst case, you can always attempt to install a different operating system back on the machine. If you need any help, I have many different Windows and Linux guides to accomplish this on my channel. Before I begin, I also just want to mention that if you're feeling generous, to think about donating to support my channel in either Ko-Fi or Patreon. Every bit goes right back into making new guides. Alright, with that all said, let's dive into it. Alright, so let's talk about the system requirements for 25.10. So just as I mentioned, any web pages that I show off I will have in the description below should you want to reference any of this stuff on your own. So you're going to want a 2 GHz dual-core processor, 4 GB of RAM. It also has the breakdown that there is the physical installs, such as actually installing it on a desktop or a laptop, and then there's the virtualized installs. But anyhow, so physical is 4 gigs, a virtual machine is 2 gigs of RAM, 25 gig hard drive, it says 8.6 gigabytes for minimal, a GPU that has 256 megs of RAM or more, a 1024 by 768 resolution or better, which is pretty easy to come by these days, USB flash drive or DVD drive for installing the media, and then internet access is helpful. So pretty straightforward stuff, and should be relatively easy to attain these days. Basically a machine that's within about 15 years should get the job done for this. So let's jump to downloading Ubuntu 25.10. So on Ubuntu's main page, let's click on the download for free. And then the first option is going to show the LTS or long-term support variant. However, that's on 24.04.3 at the moment, whereas for version 25, we need to scroll down a little bit. So you'll have two options. One is going to be for Intel or AMD 64-bit architecture. So it's just as it says, if you have an Intel or AMD processor, this is going to be the one you choose. This is what most people are going to choose. There is the ARM64 variant if you're using an ARM-based processor. However, I'm going to be installing this on an Intel-based machine, so I'm just going to click the download button and then just wait for it to download, and then once it's done, then we will continue on. So mine's already downloaded, so let's continue on with the next steps. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a bootable media to install this off. Now you've got two options. You can either use an 8 GB or larger USB thumb drive, or you could burn this to a dual layer DVD if you wanted to. Most people these days are going to use the USB thumb drive option, and that's what I'm going to use today. So now is the magic that we need to work to create the USB thumb drive. So we're going to use Rufus. You could also use something like Etcher, but the thing with Etcher is that it requires dependency applications to be installed with it, whereas Rufus doesn't actually need to be installed. It's just a standalone executable with no dependency requirements. So let's scroll down on Rufus's page. Unfortunately, Rufus's page is littered with all sorts of clickbait download buttons and whatnot. So the key thing, look for the download section that says latest releases. You're going to have a whole bunch of options to choose from. Most people are going to choose the top one, which is the Windows x64 standard. There is the portable version, however, I have not found a use for it because, once again, as I said, these are just self-contained executables that don't require any installation. So next up is going to be the x86 variant, aka 32-bit version if you're running a 32-bit version of Windows. And then the last one is if you're using Windows ARM64, then you can download that one. However, like I said, most users are going to choose this top variant, and that's what I'm going to choose today. So we're going to click on download. It is an incredibly small file, as you can see here, 1.8 megs, or 4.9 for the ARM-based one, but still, 4.9, 1.8, still very tiny in the grand scheme of things these days. So once you have Rufus downloaded, let's continue on. I'm going to go ahead and open up my downloads folder and then close out of the browser. Now before we do anything in here, there's two things that we're going to adjust. So the first thing we're going to adjust is the autoplay function. With autoplay turned on, sometimes it can cause corruption to USB thumb drives when they're being created, because it's trying to view the files as they're being added to the thumb drive, and it causes all sorts of wacky stuff to happen. Now I'm going to turn it off for this video, but you can feel free to turn it back on after you're done making your media. So if we go down to Start, and then type in Auto, and it should come up with autoplay settings, click on that, and then just toggle the little toggle button to off, and then close out of that. Next up is going to be Windows Defender. So Windows Defender unfortunately is in the bad habit of flagging a lot of Linux operating system files as being malicious. These are false positives. The way for us to easily get around this is to temporarily suspend real-time protection on Windows Defender. When I say temporarily suspend it, as in we basically open up a 15-minute window where it is suspended, and then after 15 minutes it will turn itself automatically back on, or if you reboot your machine before then, it will turn back on. So let's move forward with that right now. So if we click on Start, and then type in Security, and then click on Windows Security, and then click on Virus and Threat Protection. Then under Virus and Threat Protection Settings, click on Manage Settings. And then right here, Real-Time Protection, let's toggle this off. Select Yes for the UAC prompt. And then you're going to get a little pop-up balloon in the bottom. We can just click the X for that. So now we have our 15-minute window to work this magic. So at this point, go ahead and plug in your 8GB or larger USB thumb drive. Or if you are burning this to a dual-layer DVD, then you can right-click on the ISO. You can select Show More Options if you're on Windows 11. On Windows 10, this will just show up automatically. And then you click on Burn to Disk. But anyhow, I'm going to move forward with the USB thumb drive method. So let's double-click on Rufus. Select Yes for the UAC prompt. And then if you want to have it check online for updates, you can. I'm just going to click Yes. And in this case, I'm building the thumb drive up on one machine, and then I'm going to use it on an entirely different machine to actually load it up. And I mention that because some people in some of my videos are wondering if it can only be built on the machine that is actually going to be the one to get the operating system on it. And that's not the case. You can build it on any machine and then plug it into a different machine that's entirely different specs, and it will install. Anyhow, hopefully your USB thumb drive is appearing in the top. If it's not, then I'd recommend unplugging it and plugging it back in and waiting a few seconds. If it still doesn't appear, leave the USB thumb drive plugged in, reboot your machine, go through the Windows Defender real-time protection disabling steps, and then try again. If it's still not showing up, you could try to format the drive. If you go to Windows Explorer, I'll make a new tab, but if we go to this PC, and then you could locate your thumb drive, right-click on it, select Format. Key thing, make sure there's no data that you actually need saved off of it before you move forward with this. And then you could just click Start, and then it should hopefully work for you. Worst case, try an entirely different thumb drive if it's still not showing up. Anyhow, in my case, mine is showing up. So now let's click on the Select button, and then locate where you downloaded your Ubuntu 25.10 ISO, select that, click on Open, and then I leave everything as defaults here. I let Rufus decide what is the best method to create this bootable media. And then just as I'd mentioned earlier, if there's any data on the thumb drive that you need, please back it up before you continue on, because this is going to format it and add the operating system files onto it. So in my case, I don't have anything to back up, so I'll click on Start. And then you may get this ISO hybrid image detected. We're going to leave it on the recommended setting, click on OK. It may also pop up with a download required for Grub, and we'll select Yes for this. And that's warning us that the data is going to be destroyed on the thumb drive, so I'm going to click on OK. And then at this point, let's just be patient as it works the magic, and then we will continue on. Alright, if all goes well, we should see a green ready bar. If you get any pop-ups mentioning that there is an error, first thing to do is just try again. If it still errors out, reboot the machine, go through the steps again with Windows Defender, temporarily turning off real-time protection, and then try again. If it still is acting up, try downloading the Ubuntu 25 ISO again, and then again, if it's still acting up, then it might be worth trying a different USB thumb drive. Anyhow, in this case, everything looks fine, so I'm going to click on Close. Next up is going to be what I consider the trickiest step of getting a machine to actually boot off of the USB thumb drive. Every make and model is unfortunately different. So my recommendation is to Google your exact make and model computer, or if you built your machine, Google the motherboard model and look up what the boot key is going to be to pull up your boot options menu. So I'm going to plug my USB thumb drive into the machine, then I'm going to nuke the operating system on and strictly install Ubuntu on it. And we'll continue on. In my case, mine is the F12 key, but not all Lenovo's are that key. So you get something kind of like this. Unfortunately, every boot menu is usually different between makes and models. Anyhow, the key thing to look for is look at this section right here. So there you may see something that says USB HDD or USB hard disk drive. It might even say USB virtual CD drive, or it could say USB thumb drive or something along those lines. What I really look for is the model of thumb drive that I actually have. So in this case, I've got a Samsung thumb drive, so I'm going to hit enter for this. Use the down arrow just to break us from that 10-second countdown. So by default, if you don't press anything, it will go with try or install Ubuntu as the default. However, if you're using a machine that has an NVIDIA graphics card in it, I would recommend you choose the Ubuntu Safe Graphics option for the installation process. A lot of times the default install Ubuntu will sometimes stall out, it'll freeze, things like that on NVIDIA graphics cards. So when in doubt, NVIDIA graphics cards, use this option. If you do have any issues, even if you don't have an NVIDIA card, it may be a safe bet to try this option as well. Next up is the boot from next volume and the UEFI firmware settings, which will attempt to actually get into your system's BIOS. One thing to mention also before we continue on is the Safe Graphics option. The steps are all going to be the same between these two. The only difference is that the resolution for Safe Graphics is going to be lower, so things are going to look giant potentially for you. But anyhow, we will continue on with the default of try or install Ubuntu, hit enter, and then just be patient as it loads everything to memory so we can continue on. Alright, first thing you're going to be met with is the choose your language option. So choose your language at this step and then click on next. I'm going to leave mine on English. Next up is accessibility in Ubuntu. Feel free to change up anything in these subsections if you need to. In my case, I'm going to leave it as is and I'll click on next. Next up is that you can adjust your keyboard layout. I'm going to leave mine as is, but just one thing to mention is that you can also type in this section if you choose something different in here and you want to see how your keyboard reacts to it. Then you can just type in words into this section. Just like so. Anyhow, I'm going to leave mine as is because that all looks fine. I'm going to click on next. So you'll be met with the connect to the internet option. Ideally, I would recommend that you connect into an Ethernet connection if possible. If you can't connect in because modem and router are not within range, or your machine doesn't have an Ethernet connection, then you could choose the connect to Wi-Fi network option. It will show you the wireless networks that are within range that you connect into. Mine is going to be partially blurred out for this video, but it's pretty self-evident what you can choose, and then you would connect up, and then you can click on next. It also does give the option to connect to a hidden Wi-Fi network, and then there's also the option to do not connect to the internet. I would highly recommend that you connect to the internet during the installation process so that it can pull down any optional files that it might need, as well as updates. Anyhow, mine is plugged into an Ethernet connection, so I'm going to use that option. We'll click on next. You do have the option to install Ubuntu, but you could also try Ubuntu. So this is actually running Ubuntu right now in what's called a live disk environment. The downside is that any adjustments or anything you download or install are not persistent. So if you reboot the machine and you're trying Ubuntu, then none of that will save. So really the best option is just install Ubuntu. You'll get better performance. You'll be able to customize stuff. You can save stuff. You can install things, all that good stuff. We'll leave install Ubuntu on, click on next. There's going to be the option of how would you like to install Ubuntu. Most users are going to choose interactive installation. However, if you're part of more of like an enterprise environment, you're installing this on a lot of different machines, you actually can choose the automated with auto install file, in which case you would have an auto install.yaml file that you can use that will basically going to set all the base configurations automatically so that it speeds up the whole process of installing the operating system. But anyhow, like I said, most people are going to choose the interactive installation. You'll click on next. Next up, it's going to ask you what apps would you like to install to start with. So by default, it just gives you the essentials, as it mentions, a web browser and basic utilities. The other option is the extended selection option, which also comes with office tools, utilities, and the web browser, just as it mentions here. Now you could choose the default selection option and then just install the stuff that's in the extended selection after the fact if you wanted to. So really, it's completely up to you on what you want to choose. I think most people choose the default selection, that way it still allows you to leave the machine as unbloated as possible and then custom add the things that you want after the fact. I'm going to leave it on the default selection and then we'll click on next. Next up is the install recommended proprietary software, and just as it mentions, Ubuntu ships with no proprietary software by default. Installing additional software may improve your computer's performance. I recommend that you check both of these boxes. So I recommend install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, and then I also recommend that you download and install support for additional media formats. And then we'll click on next. And then this is the how do you want to install Ubuntu option. Now this guide is strictly installing Ubuntu and no other operating system on the machine. You technically can dual boot Ubuntu and other operating systems. However, for the sake of the video today, I am not going to be going through those steps because there's a few different things that you need to change up and a few warnings and whatnot that you need to understand before you create a dual boot machine. So anyhow, for today's video, we'll click on Erase Disk and Install Ubuntu, and then we'll click on Next. You're going to be met with the encryption and file system. So by default, no encryption is set. You could turn on encrypt with a passphrase. And then one thing to mention is there is the show advanced options, and this allows you to further configure things. So you could use LVM without encryption, you can use ZFS without encryption. Note how they're experimental in these parts here. You can feel free to research these if they are something that you might want to choose. But for today's video, we're going to choose no encryption. We're going to click on next. And now we're going to create our account. So go ahead and type in your name. It's going to pre-fill a whole bunch of sections here with your name. You can feel free to change up what your computer's name or host name is going to be. So let me just change this up to something different. I'm just going to set it to Ubuntu machine. You can feel free to change it to whatever you want. For your username, I'm actually going to just remove the -scriptorium out and just leave it as digital. I do recommend that you put a password in and that it is a strong password. I am going to use a very not secure password for the sake of this video, but like I said, use something that is strong. And then notice it says it's a weak password. Try to get this to show that it's a strong password. You can also click the show button if you want to see what you typed in. But once you've typed in the password, then you do need to confirm it. And then if all goes well, it should have the green check box. If it mentions that the password is not the same, delete it out, try to type it again. If it's still saying it's not the same, then perhaps delete this out and retype that, and also utilize that show button. I do recommend you leave require my password to log in checked. There is the option for use Active Directory. So if you're in an enterprise environment and you're using Active Directory, you could choose this and go through those steps. Anyhow, we will click on next. Next up is going to be choosing your time zone. You can either manually click where you are and it will automatically set your time zone for you, or you can type in a location up here and that will work the magic for you as well. I'm just going to click my time zone here and click on next. And then this is basically saying that it's ready to install. So at this point, if you feel there is any data that you need to back up, you can close out of this and go back in to Windows or whatever operating system you're on, back up your data, and then follow the steps just as we went through previously here, and then click on install. Because like I said, this is going to nuke the drive and just install Ubuntu as the only operating system. So in my case, I don't have anything to back up, so I'm going to click on install. And then at this point, we can just sit back. You can feel free to watch the little slideshow that's going to move forward here. If you're curious what is happening behind the scenes in the terminal, you can click on this little icon down here, and as you can see, it's going to show you everything that is happening. So we're just going to sit back and we will continue on once this is done. Alright, if all goes well, we should see installation complete. If you get any errors or anything of that sort, just try again. If you're still getting errors, it might be worth trying a different USB thumb drive. And if you still get errors, well, it might be worth downloading a fresh ISO to rule any kind of corruption out. Anyhow, in my case, mine shows installation complete. You do have the option to continue testing in the live environment, but in my case, I'm going to click on Restart Now, and then just be patient as everything restarts here. And then you're going to get this pop-up that says, please remove the installation medium, and then press Enter. So let's pull the thumb drive, and then we will press Enter. And I'll press Enter. And then if all goes well, we should see the Ubuntu logo and the little spinny thing. The first time that it boots up on its own, it might take a little bit longer as it's trying to build up certain files and all that good stuff. So just be patient. All right, we should be met with our login screen. So let's click on this and then type in your password and hit enter. And then it should load up to the desktop for us. So we'll be met with the welcome to Ubuntu 25.10. Complete your setup with additional settings and we'll have you up and running in no time. Let's click on the next button. So there's the help improve Ubuntu option. So this is completely optional. I'm going to choose no, don't share system data. But if you want to leave it as sharing your data, that's perfectly fine. We'll click on next. And this is basically saying that there is the App Center that you can download all sorts of applications from, web browsers, Steam, all sorts of stuff. And we'll go over that a little bit more later on. So we'll click on Finish. So at this point, Ubuntu 25 is now installed. However, if you want to continue to watch the video where I show off a basic tour of Ubuntu, then feel free to keep watching. With that said, let's dive into that next segment. So starting off, let's take a look at the top right-hand corner. So you're going to have a network, volume, and power button icon up here. They're all the same buttons, so if you click anywhere on one of these, it's going to open up the same exact panel. But taking a look in this panel now, all the way to the left, if you click on this, this is going to be your screenshot or video screenshot options. So by default, it's set to selection, so you can feel free to move your selection around. You can also move where you're capturing your screenshot. There's the screen option, which is literally going to take a screenshot of the entire screen. If you have applications open, then you can choose a window and you can choose which application window to actually take the screenshot from. And then you can press basically the capture button. Now, if you want a record screen, then it gives you the same exact options. Once again, a selection area or the screens or a specific application window, and then just press the capture and then it will start recording, and then press it again and it will stop recording. Pretty self-explanatory. Back to the top right. Next, over on the right is going to be the settings section. So we click on this just to bring it up. This is where all of your settings are located. We'll go into this into more detail in a little bit here, so I'll close out of that. But anyhow, back to the top right hand corner. Next, over to the right is going to be the lock button. So if you are walking away from your machine, but you want to lock your screen, you can click the lock button. It will keep your applications open, running behind the scenes, but it will lock the screen so that other people can't sit down and start tampering with your open applications. Anyhow, once you're ready, then you can log back in and hit enter. Back up to the top right hand corner. Next, over to the right is going to be the power button. This is going to give you the options of suspending, restarting, powering off, or logging out. And then below those buttons is going to be your volume slider. So this of course increases your volume and that decreases your volume. You can click the little speaker icon and that will mute it. Click it again, that will unmute it. If you have a wired network card in your machine, you'll see the wired option. You can click the little arrow next to it and it will give you a breakout of different options. One is you can actually disconnect your wired connection. You can go to wired settings. Next, over on the right is going to be Wi-Fi. So if you have a wireless card in your machine, you'll be able to click on this. You'll see your wireless networks that are within range that you can connect to. I'll have this partially blurred out. Next up is going to be the power mode. So this is going to be your power options. So if you click on this, by default, Ubuntu is set to balance. So this means that if you are not using a whole lot of applications and whatnot, then it dips into more of a power saver mode. And then if you're needing more performance, it kind of dips into the performance mode. However, if you're a user who feels as though they need raw performance at all times, you can click on this. This obviously is going to increase your power usage, increase heat, increase noise, all that good stuff. And then if you're trying to conserve power, this is mainly for laptop users. If you're really trying to extend your battery, then you would choose the power saver option, and that's going to adjust a whole bunch of things such as decreasing your screen brightness and restricting your CPU utilization and stuff like that. And then you also have the power settings option, which we'll take a peek at a little bit later. Next up on the right is the night light option. So if you click on this, this is going to make it so that it decreases the blues in your screen, and toggling that off again will bring it back to normal. Next up is the dark and light style options. So this is dark style, and then this is light. I'm going to turn the dark style on because I prefer that, however, completely optional. There's also a do not disturb feature that you can turn on if you wanted to. So that's it for that whole menu. Over to the left is going to be your date and time. If we click on this, over on the left is going to be your notifications panel. So this is where all notifications are going to show up. And then over on the right is going to be your calendar. You can feel free to toggle between months and years and all that good stuff. If you set anything on your calendar, they would show up as events here. You can also take a look at world clocks if you wanted to. Next up, let's take a look at the top left corner. So if you click on this, this is going to sort of zoom you out. And this is where you can actually see that there are multiple desktops that you can choose from. So if you have applications open on this desktop, you can jump to the other desktop, open another application on here, and then you can toggle between multiple applications if you wanted to by using these virtual desktops. The other thing to mention is that there is a search bar up at the top. So you could type in something like terminal and it will show you the terminal app. So I just wanted to show that. If you click back into one of these desktops, it will zoom you in. So next up below that is going to be Firefox. So Firefox is the default browser that is part of Ubuntu. It's one of those things that you could install any browser of your choosing if you don't want to use Firefox, especially as many people now are starting to lean away from Firefox with kind of some of the latest policy change-ups that they've had. But Firefox will give you basically what you need out of a browser experience. So we'll close out of that. Below that is going to be Files. So if we click on this, and then let me maximize this. So this is going to show you all the files that are on your machine depending on which category you choose. So by default, it goes to your home folder directory. So this is the files that are on your user account. So this is my digital accounts files. So if there was another account on here, they would not be able to access these unless they had my password. But you'll also have recent, so if there were any recent files that you opened, they would show up in here. Obviously, this is a clean build of Ubuntu where I haven't actually opened anything yet, so that's why this shows no recent files. There's the starred files, which basically allows you to favorite files, and they would show up in here. There's the network option, so if there's any discoverable devices, such as a NAS or network attached storage server on your network, then you would see them here. There's your trash. So if you have anything in your trash, then you would be given the option to empty the trash or restore anything that's in here. And then below that is going to be documents, music, pictures, videos, and downloads. Note how as I'm hovering over these, it's actually showing me down below them the full directory path of these folders, in case you're curious on that. We can close out of this for right now. So below your files is going to be the App Center. So let's click on this. So this is basically an app store where you can easily download and install applications on Ubuntu. So this is where you could potentially install something like Steam or your Office apps, things like that. You can feel free to utilize the search feature up here. So for instance, I'll type in Steam, hit enter, and then it's going to give you whatever is hitting that search word. One thing also to mention is if you take a look down here at the Manage section, this is going to show you applications that might need updates. In this case, it mentions that there is an update available. Let's actually click on check for updates, and then let's go ahead and kick off an update all, and then type in your password, hit enter, and this is really just to make sure that everything's going to be happy moving forward. And then let's do one more check for updates just to ensure that nothing else is there, and it looks like that there are no new updates available. So anyhow, we can continue on. But I do also just want to mention that there is the Explore option, there's featured apps, productivity apps, development apps, and then game category apps that you can choose from. So we'll close out of that. And then below the App Center is going to be help. So if you're curious on something that might be acting up, or you're trying to figure out something within Ubuntu, then you can feel free to take a gander at this Ubuntu desktop guide. Close out of that. And then below that is going to be your trash. And just as I showed off in files, if you had something in here, it would give you the option to delete it or restore it. Close out of that. And then down in the bottom left-hand corner is the Show Apps section. So this is going to show you all of the apps that are installed on the machine currently. One thing to note is that there is the search feature in the top. One thing I just want to mention is that there is the software updater. If you click on this, then it will check for updates for your machine. But we'll click out of that. And we'll go back. So let's do a quick run through of what is available within the settings. And I'll maximize this. So starting in the top left corner, there actually is a search bar. So if you're looking for a specific setting that you want to search for, you can type it in here and it will show you the relevant results for that. Now by default, when you click in the settings, at least for the first time, it's going to default you to Wi-Fi. So this gives you everything you expect out of the Wi-Fi configurations. You can turn it on, you can turn it off, connect to hidden network, turn on Wi-Fi hotspots, and then available wireless networks that are available to you. If you don't have wireless chipset in your machine or a wireless dongle, then this won't show up as an option. Below that is network. So this is going to show you general information on your wired network if you have an Ethernet port on your machine. Below that's going to be Bluetooth. In my case, I don't have a Bluetooth controller on my machine, but it would give you Bluetooth options in here to choose from. Below that's going to be display. So this is where you can change up your screen orientation, your resolution, refresh rate, and scale, along with fractional scaling and night light configurations. And then below that is sound. So you've got your output devices for your speakers or headset. And then there's the input. If you had a microphone, you can change up the settings. And there's a few other settings down below that you can alter. And then below sound is power. So this again shows the power modes that I went over previously. You can change up what your power button will do. You can change up the automatic screen blank, and then the delay time that the screen would blank out. And then there's also an automatic suspend setting. Now, at least for my machine, it has it turned off, and that works out well for my desktop. However, if you're on a laptop, you may want to think about turning this on so that it doesn't just run it until the battery is basically out. So automatic suspend would make it so that the machine would go to sleep after a certain period of time. And that's why, like I said, it's beneficial for laptops. Below that is multitasking. So there's a number of settings that you can adjust, and there is a scroll bar with more configurations that can be altered in multitasking. And then next up is appearance. So you're going to be able to choose your style. So default, aka light mode, and then dark mode. You can change up your accent colors if you wanted to. As you can see, they're changing slightly. I prefer the orange, it's very Ubuntu-like. And you can change up your background desktop if you wanted to. I'll change it to that just because I can. And then below that is Ubuntu Desktop. So this is just literally your desktop configurations, such as the size, position of new icons, a home folder. There's the auto hide dock option, which this is the dock over here. And then one thing you can also do if you wanted to is you can change where the dock actually shows up. You could change it to the bottom, you can change it to the right, or just keep it on the left, whichever you prefer. And then there's configure dock behavior, and then enhanced tiling down below. Below that's going to be apps. Now if you click on these, each one is actually going to potentially show different things. So some may just show notification settings, but then something such as Firefox may give you a whole bunch of other different configurations that you can choose from. And again, there is a search bar at the top if you want to search for a specific app instead of manually searching for it. Below that's going to be notifications. So every app that is currently installed is going to show up in here and give its various configurations and allow you to turn it on or off for notifications. If you add something else and you want to alter it, then you would go back in here, find the new app, and make the change. Below that is search. So if you want to alter any of your search configurations, you can do so within here. And then below that is online accounts. So if you wanted to connect up to an online account, you can do so within this section. Below that is sharing. So this is a section where you could change your device name, aka host name, if you wanted to. And then you can also change up if you want media sharing turned on or off. Below this is going to be well-being. So this allows you to set screen time limits and stuff like that if you really wanted to. And it also gives you analytics into how much the screen time the machine is currently using. And then below that's going to be mouse and touchpad. So this is where you can adjust your mouse and touchpad configurations if you wanted to. And then below that's a keyboard. So again, you can change up keyboard layouts, add input sources. So if you accidentally put in the wrong configuration during the setup process, then you can alter it after the fact within these settings. Below this is color management. So this is if you have any color profiles that you want to set. And then below that is printers. So if you wanted to add a printer, you could do so here. And then below that is accessibility. If you want to, again, adjust any accessibility features after the fact from the installation setup portion, then you can do so within this section. And then below that's going to be privacy and security. So you can change up a whole bunch of things if you wanted to within there. And then finally at the very bottom is going to be system. A few big ones in here is going to be date and time if you wanted to alter your date and time. This is also where you can add users, and you can also change their passwords, or you can remove users if you wanted to. There's SSH configurations if you wanted to muck around in that. And then there is about. So about is going to show you your device name or host name, aka another spot where you can change it if you wanted to. It's going to show you what operating system you're on, and it's going to give you hardware information. You can also click on system details if you wanted to see a further breakout of those configurations. I'm just going to hit the back arrow, and this is where you can actually click on software updates as well to make sure that your operating system is up to date. So we'll click OK for that, and we can close out of that. So lastly, the only thing to show off is that if you right click on your desktop, then it gives you the option to choose a new folder. You can either copy or paste depending on which function you want to use. There's select all, arrange icons, arrange your icons by, and it gives you a whole bunch of different options. You can show desktop files, open in terminal, change your background, desktop icon settings, and display settings. So that's all you need to do to install Ubuntu 25.10 from start to finish. If you found this video to be useful, please like it and subscribe to my channel to keep up my latest video happenings. I also invite you to check out my channel if you haven't already, as it has many interesting guides and many more to come. Anyhow, until next time, take it easy.